Why aren't prices tanking? I thought for sure the housing market would be crashing right now. I've been hearing this sentiment quite a bit, and in today's video, I want to talk through this dynamic of why prices haven't been dropping. Okay, the market feels a lot more competitive than we would have thought, and here's why. My name's Ryan with SacramentoAppraisalBlog.com. This should be about 10 to 12 minutes. Let's jump in. So, one of the things that we've seen in the Sacramento region and in many markets across the country is that we're simply struggling with fewer listings today compared to last year at the same time. In fact, in the Sacramento region, there's literally 1,000 fewer listings this year compared to last year. And so in 2019 in blue, 2020 in green, you could see in every single price category, there's simply fewer listings. And so that's sort of compounded the market. It's made the market feel a lot more competitive than we would have thought. But more notably, here's a sensational stat. 2,668 fewer listings this year since the pandemic began compared to 2019. So essentially, over about a period of 3 months, the past 90 days, we've seen almost 2,700 fewer listings compared to last year at the same time. And so what that's done is that it's made the market feel more competitive as buyers have seemed to come back to the market to a greater extent than sellers. And buyers are coming back to this arena with simply fewer properties on the market. And buyers, you know what I'm talking about? Comment below and let me know what it's been like to search right now. Okay, here's weekly listings in the Sacramento region, the stat I just showed. Here's in 2020 in red, you can see listings have been making a recovery, but compared to 2019 in blue, we're much further down. In fact, almost 2,700 less listings this year. Okay. Now, one thing to consider also is that there's been a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions. And so this is a small sliver of the market, but it is something that can affect at least some listings coming to the market. So FHFA has a moratorium through June 30th, 2020 so far. All right. But here's new listings in the Sacramento region. You can see a sharp dip in mid-March and then a 9-week recovery so far. Okay, so sellers have been getting more used to the market. Not as used to buyers though, unfortunately. But over this past week, I think the good news is there are 681 new listings compared to 579 the previous week, and so it's good to see more. I do recall last week though we had a holiday and people could have easily been thinking about boating and barbecues, and so I wouldn't write too much over 100 new listings this week, but we're really still down about 5% from where we were before the pandemic began. All right, hold statuses. There were really hundreds of extra holds over the past 3 months compared to what we normally would have seen. And so when you think about this in mid-March, when we began to see more holds, it's no wonder why the market feels more competitive since there's been some properties that would be listed that are sort of held back. Okay, similar with cancellations. You can see an uptick in mid-March, but we're really approaching very normal levels right now. But again, this underscores the reality that properties there's been more that canceled over the past few months compared to the previous year, and so definitely we've had a market that feels more competitive. All right, like I said, buyers have seemed to come back to the market faster than sellers, and here's what I mean by that. So here's pending sales by the week in the Sacramento region. And you can see a dramatic downtrend for 3 weeks, but then a recovery, quite a dramatic recovery over the past 9 weeks. And so for 3 weeks in a row, we've crested where we were before the pandemic began. Okay, and so listings aren't even back to where they were before the pandemic began, but for 3 weeks in a row, I would say that buyers have been ahead of sellers. Okay, so there are 720 pendings this past week. This number will even go up in coming days compared to 701 last week. Okay, we're 17.6% higher than we were in mid-March. All right, so let me show you buyers versus sellers, and a dynamic anyway. So here's new listings in 2020 in red, and then pendings in orange. And so you can see literally for the past 3 weeks in a row, we've seen more pending contracts than new listings that have hit the market. All right, and so this is why things feel so competitive and why sometimes people feel angry like, hey, I thought there would be this huge COVID discount. What's going on? Okay, not everyone wants a high price. Sure, the seller does, but there's a lot of reasons why when people are, going through litigation or dissolving, a marriage, where they want the value lower, but the stats aren't always showing that, okay? By the way, if you like this video, if I'm giving you value, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you so much. Here's a backdoor way to look at the market. I find this fascinating. When you go to Google Trends and type in housing crash, you can see in mid-March there is this huge uptick in search queries for housing crash, but since then, it's really tapered off. Okay, it almost looks like my graph of holds. Fascinating. Okay, and then here's Google Trends for real estate market in red. And so we want to consider this, what are people typing into search engines? Where is their psyche? What are they thinking about? Because what they're thinking about will influence their decisions and their behavior, okay? And because I'm super mature, here's in yellow, you can see mullet. Clearly there's a relationship, okay? Mullet is the haircut of the pandemic. So, okay, I'm kidding there. But 94% of sales in May got into contract after the pandemic began. Okay, and so what we're seeing as we begin to unpack May stats, particularly as I do a deep dive next week, we have some more pure pandemic data where almost everything in that is closed in May represents a property that got into contract after the coronavirus began to affect the housing market. So prices. I've been calling prices in a lot of areas very flat. It seems like when I'm looking at recent comps or even stuff from last year that the market feels very flat or it's up slightly. And so let's look at Sacramento County. When we consider May 2019 compared to May 2020, when we look at the median price, and average price per square foot, they're typically up about 3% or so. In the Sacramento region, it's more subdued, where it's up, almost nothing to 2%, depending on the metric we look at. And so this is going to vary by price range. My sense is that the market's more competitive under 400, but it's going to vary by, neighborhood. It's going to vary by city or zip code or property type. The trend isn't the same for condos and land in 2 to 4 units and Airbnb rentals and such. And so let's be careful about analyzing the market in each of these subcategories. Here's the monthly prices in the Sacramento region. You can see the average price per square foot in green. In pink is the average sales price, and blue is the median price. This is from 2018 onward. And lately, when I look at preliminary May data, it looks like the median price and the average price per square foot have begun to dip, and the average sales price is kind of flat. And so overall, I think this supports this notion that, okay, the market has been more flat than not. What we do see happening here, I think we need a few months to understand it and interpret it. It's normal for a market to begin changing around May or so. Now, my sense is that it almost looks like prices have begun to crest about 1 month early. And so is this, change in prices, is it due to the pandemic? Are we seeing a market beginning to slough? Is it, related to having less sales volume and less data? Or is this a normal seasonal thing? These are questions we have to ask in coming time. For people who want to understand definitively, tell me exactly what the market's doing and what it's going to do from here on out. I don't think anyone can do that honestly. Okay, let's look at sales volume and unemployment, and then I'll close with some tips. So in 2020, you can see weekly sales volume in blue. Okay, now weekly sales volume in a normal year, you should see like in 2019 in red and 2018 in green, you should see it continue to increase the number of sales. But clearly there were less pendings, there were less listings, and sales volume fell off a cliff. But really over the past 2 weeks, and once I compile data for this past week, we'll say over the past 3 weeks, we've begun to see more of a recovery in sales volume. So it just shows that I think that all these extra pendings over the past subsequent, 6 to 7 weeks here are beginning to show up in properties that are closing. All right. Here's a different way to look at it. Same trend, but in 2020 in blue, you can see very clearly there's been an uptick in sales volume. In 2019 in yellow, we're nowhere near where we would be in a normal year. All right. The unemployment rate in the United States, the big news this past Friday was it ticked down. All right. And so it's at 13.3% instead of 14.7%. Now, as it relates to Sacramento, you can see Sacramento County in blue and the unemployment rate in black in the United States. Now, Sacramento data hasn't come out yet. Okay, so for California in any county on June 19th, Friday, we're going to have those stats published. Okay, sellers in particular, pay attention to this because this could get in the psyche of buyers. But Historically, Sacramento tends to follow the US, and so we'll kind of see where it goes. Presumably, I guess we could, look to the future and maybe assume and hope that unemployment rate would go down in Sacramento also. But here's a big closing thought on unemployment. Here's a graph from Bill McBride of the Calculated Risk blog, and you can see unemployment from after World War II. So here's, for instance, in blue, you can see in 2007, where the unemployment rate went, and then, how long it took to recover. Here's where we are in 2020. It's literally, I mean, just such a different trend. But the one thing we don't have in our market right now, we don't understand how long it's going to take for, the job market to recover. We don't know how long it will take for people to get back to work. The hope is that will happen soon. Okay, if this is long and, prolonged, then I think it would be safe to say that we would be, poised to see a greater effect on the housing market. Okay, right? If people aren't working, then they're going to be struggling to buy homes. All right. So this is an X factor. This is something to watch. It's something we'll know more about over these next months. All right. Some quick closing thoughts. We need time to see the trend. We need days, we need weeks, and we need months. Don't be afraid to say something different about the market if the stats are telling a different story. Okay. The market has not been tanking despite expectations of that. This is where I think we have to be careful to not impose this idea on the market. We go, look, record high unemployment. You know, we have forbearance, we have all these issues, but that doesn't mean that right now that the market is tanking. Could it in the future? Of course. Could the market change? Absolutely. But we have to not look at the market with rose-colored lenses or doom and gloom lenses. We have to interpret the stats as they are. Okay, the market doesn't feel the same in every price range. I had someone reach out to me this week wanting more data and more emphasis in my videos on different segments of the market. And I'll be getting to that as we have more data this month. And in fact, next week, I'll be sharing different price segments, and I'm going to touch on inventory in every price range. I'm going to touch on how days on market are changing and touch on how sales volume is changing. These are all clues into submarkets. All right. Two more things. Prices are price to similar homes that are actually getting into contract. If you want to know the temperature of the current market, make sure that you're looking at what is actually getting into contract. Okay, sellers, don't price to that overpriced seller, that property is not moving, it's not moving. That doesn't represent the market. Okay, the last but not least, I'd just say to be really careful about confirmation bias. As we get new stats, the temptation can be that we interpret stats in light of our existing beliefs. And so it's like if you see a left-handed person that's creative and you believe that that left-handed person or left-handed people are more creative, you go, see, look, like just exactly what I expected. But so the danger in real estate is that we look and we see a few price reductions above the $1 million level. We go, look, the market is beginning to crash. Or we look at unemployment stats and we say, look how high they are. Gosh, I expect the market to be declining, but then it's not. And that's exactly what we've been talking about in this video. So I hope you get a sense of how much more competitive the market is and why. So I hope you like this. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I'll look forward to touching base next week. Hope you guys are well. Be safe out there. Be at peace.